Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
So I have a few things, if I could just touch upon them. First and foremost, I just want this community, I want the workers to know that the discussion here is about roads. It's about the infrastructure, the physical roads of this community. If the auditor controller's office were the ones who was responsible for repairing those roads and maintaining those roads, I'd be advocating for the auditor's controller's office to get those wages. This is something that we've been discussing as a board for 3.5 years that I've been on this board. This particular department has been grossly and chronically understaffed. So in the last couple weeks, I've heard from a lot of you, and I appreciate it. I want you to know I appreciate all of your comments, good and bad. I got one comment from staff that's saying that, you know what, roads are not in that dire of a condition right now. We've got roads that are in pretty good shape. When I was elected, I learned just how horrible the conditions at the jail were. And as we dove deeper into the jail, we found that years of neglect and failed maintenance had caused the building to require a $10 million facelift. And that's as of right now, $10 million. Thanks to Mr. Burns and the federal government, we got a $3.1 million award toward that, and AB 109 and other state-issued funding was able to come up with $1.5 million. We're still not even halfway there of what we need to play catch-up on a building or an infrastructure that we let deteriorate to a degree. Right now, with roads not being as bad as people say they are, we have a responsibility of this board. This board of supervisors is not in charge of the wages. I agree. I mean, that's our budgeting team, our union team. But we have to be responsible for the actual infrastructure of these buildings. That is our responsibility. And when problems come and they're presented before us about how we need to fix this, we need to take a bold step. In 2017, I was in this room. I wasn't on the board. I wasn't even involved in politics. And I watched the director of the California Transportation Commission grill Director Kunstl. And Mr. Daniels, you were there too. And for a half hour, you guys were asked, how many miles of roads do we have? How much have you chip sealed? Why have you not chip sealed more? All the obstacles, because of the funding that the state has given down, they wanted you to address what it is, why you couldn't get done what needed to get done. Last week, an article in Politico, that's my go-to, Gavin Newsom decided to take back $10 million from San Diego for a homeless project because they weren't moving fast enough. They weren't spending the money like he directed them to do. As the state, as Supervisor Wilson has indicated several times, as the state starts to tighten their belt, they're going to start looking at the funding that's going out. And they're going to tighten their belt. And if they go to community and see that we are not getting the work done, we're not spending the money that they gave us, there's a real potential that that's going to derail any efforts that we have. So my second point is that this board, in past meetings, it says that Supervisor Short and I have blown up this whole process. One thing that I want to say that this board and previous boards, as well as staff and the public bemoan, is that this state imposes upon us a one-size-fits-all. We get so mad at the state because one size is supposed to fit all. They don't take into consideration our unique issues, our different funding streams, the problems that even other rural communities don't have, like this rural community has. So by trying for us to address individual departments' vacancy rates with a one-size-fits-all approach, or to address all of the vacancy rates with a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work. We need to model, this board needs to model what we've bemoaned. We need to take a good hard look at each department, restructure what we can, cut the fat where we can, work on solutions that might include pay raises. It might include restructuring. It might include alternating hours. But it's our job as the ones protecting the infrastructure to actually look department by department to see what we can do. One size fits all should be for COLAs. I agree with you, because that's a number that applies across the workforce. One size fits all for COLAs makes sense, because that is based on the inflation. That's based on those things. But when we have broken departments with chronic vacancy rates, we need to go in and fix what we can. Not all jobs are created equal. Some jobs require education, some require a skill set. Roads requires a very unique skill set. They operate heavy equipment. They operate that on uneven terrain. They operate that in the middle of the night when they get called out because there's landslides. Road jobs require skills for construction. It requires knowledge of construction techniques. It's a labor-intensive job which cannot really be compared to any other job class in SEIU as it stands right this minute. My third point, I'm almost done, is succession planning. For the last 3.5 years as a supervisor, one of the struggles that we faced, that this board has faced, has been discussing succession planning. If we look at department by department and really evaluate the need of succession planning in each department, roads is pretty high up on the list for necessity. If I was to compare it, and I was really trying when I was preparing this to think, okay, what department do I address that isn't going to be offensive and come back on me, but it probably still will. But I compared it to admin, all right? It's a high-level job that requires real good critical thinking skills and an education, and Mr. Lopez does a fabulous job in that role. And we have Mr. Hooper, who's been in his role for the last 2 years, who's there to kind of monitor and mirror everything else that's going on. But the difference with admin compared to roads is that Mr. Lopez and Mr. Hooper can rely heavily on documents and policy to help guide them. There's an admin manual, there's a county government code. And when we had our state of emergency, there was a blueprint lined out exactly what they needed to do to reference. And if they didn't know, they had state officials that they could call. Roads is any skilled laborer job. You can't watch a YouTube video before you go out and have to clear a landslide in the middle of the night on a sloping hillside. We need them to be skilled. Currently, the staff in this department, they're not senior staff. They're all relatively new. Less than 7 years, I think, is the majority of the staff. Without being staffed fully up, they can't go out and learn the skills because we just cannot get the jobs done. When we have our yearly evaluations with Ms. Kunstl, there's a list of all the projects that are proposed and a list of all the projects that we couldn't get to because we just didn't have the staff. Past superintendents, we heard from Mr. Daniels today, and I appreciate that. But Mr. Daniels was trained by Mr. Perry and Mr. Babbage. And so he was able to pass that on to the very few people that he could, but they're now gone because they had to go get higher wages, which is totally understandable. I believe that this board needs to leave our infrastructure in better condition than we found it. And we need to make sure that succession planning is achievable in this department. And I'm going to end with this. I know this has caused a lot of problems, that the proposal presented by the assistant department head, whether or not that's claimed to now have been authorized or not, and I don't need to get into that, but it was a real solution. It was not a Band-Aid. He took into consideration the obligation that we have to the state reporting. It stepped outside the one-size-fits-all approach. It took into consideration a special skill set needed for these positions, and it took a real stab at succession planning so that we, this board, can leave the infrastructure in better conditions than when we found it. That is my advocacy for option B. I understand that's not a popular option, but I just want to say that I did the assessment, and option A, which is being presented by the director, to go with option B, it's $40,000 more a year because they're eliminating 2 positions and adding 1 shop foreman back in. If we were to even modify that further and have the road superintendent, instead of a 62, be a 59, we can reduce that amount to $25,000 more than what's proposed in option A. And that's going to be my advocacy because, again, not for the raises, for the roads, for this community, for what we're charged with doing is to make sure that we have public safety and we protect the infrastructure. Thank you.
Any other comment?
So Supervisor Starkey, I fully agree with you on the wages and the skill sets and everything, almost everything you've said. But I cannot agree with step B. The main reason is there's a process, it's a procedure, there's a chain of command, and that went completely out of it and around it. We have policies in place that everyone must follow. It'd be like in the police field or the whatever. I mean, you're going around your supervising officer, and we just can't allow that. So I cannot support option B. I know I asked to bring it back, but I just wanted to see what everybody was talking about. But it didn't follow the proper steps. So I can't support you on that. I do fully support that they should be paid higher, and I will agree with option A. My question, though, is currently looking at the current budget, and maybe you know this answer or someone else, in the roads department annual budget, currently as it sits, is I believe it's like 4.9 million income. And if they're fully staffed at the current wages, their expenses jumps up to 5.6. So they're going in the negative. So what is if we get them to fully staff, and that's before this wage increase, what's the end plan there? I mean, there is excess money in the reserve fund, but that'll dwindle fast when you start burning an extra $1 million a year.
Yeah. Out of fairness, the proposal in A is only $100,000 more than what they've budgeted for. If we were to go to B, it's $140,000 more than what they budgeted for. They budget for it every year, so it's not as if they budget for it and then it's salary savings. So it's not as if we don't budget for it and have that revenue coming in. They've budgeted for it. They're saying we're able to spend this. So from current levels to option A is $97,000. From current levels to option B is $137,000. So we're not talking millions. We're talking 40,000 more than what A is. And I have spreadsheets here if anybody wants to look at them, so I'm not just talking
So
numbers.
even in option A, that'd put us at $800,000 in
Out.
the negative.
Yes.
No, it would be,
Yes.
what,
We're
okay,
right now.
Supervisor Wilson, go ahead.
Right?
No, right now, given just the changes that we just approved, given the all the road income, they're sitting at $648,990 out. So, and the only reason why that hasn't impacted the road department in the last few years is because of salary savings, unfortunately, because we've been down staff. Otherwise, this would have been more problematic than it currently is. If we make those changes, you would have to add, the 130,000 additional to the outage because they're already running in the red. My statement on this is clear. I don't support either of these two options. We did a strategy plan we put together, and in that plan, it was already detailed out that this was one of our priorities. That this was the lack of staff over there and trying to find solutions to retention within the road department was one of our priorities. Sheriff's Department was also a priority. We put together that plan. This last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, we circumvented that plan by pushing this back onto your plate and expediting it to basically a 2-meeting recovery, bringing back something that was going to address the issues based on something that was not approved of, but was given by staff to board members. We have a $5 million buffer right now. running a $800,000 deficit is going to eat that up. Plus, it won't really allow us, since we're running a deficit, a lot of material if we are fully staffed and can actually do these projects. So my issue with this decision was, one, we just authorized a comp study. We spent money putting together the strategic plan. We were now spending money on a comp study and a systems analysis so that we can see if there are ways that we can better address the needs of our budget going forward. And we just approved the money. We haven't even seen the results of that comp study. But this was pushed forward ahead of any of those information. It is unwise and to waste money for a comp study and a survey if we're not even going to wait for the results of those things to make our determinations on where we go and what our plans are going forward. It's unwise to push ourselves at a speed that doesn't afford the unions and our statement to meet together to come up with the priority that we set at solving these problems of hiring and temp retention. We just took a step today that gives a tool for hopefully hiring. We also adjusted the wages on the bottom end of these initial hires on the road crew to hopefully get some additional personnel to apply for these jobs. There are other issues. HR needs to go much faster in their hiring process. We know that. That's been a problem, and we're looking at solutions for that. We're hiring an HR director. We are trying to hire personnel so we can get this resolved. But this all takes time, and this proposal, this determination, one, it circumvents the very important strategic plan that we put in process. It is making decisions, and we're spending money on studies that we're not even waiting for the results to come in to balance out our judgments and our determination. And it's also pushes our staff to make hasty decisions on how to resolve these problems without potentially having the time to really negotiate and with the unions to be able to come up with real solutions that we can actually afford when we are looking at currently a $648,000 deficit. So I don't support either of these two plans going forward because I don't believe in making decisions that waste money or are done in haste. And both of these determinations were pushed forward on our staff outside of the normal processes and didn't allow for the strategic plan, which prioritized this as an issue going forward, to actually work out and go through the process. So, as I appreciate the work, I appreciate the time that both you and Heidi put into coming up with your recommendations. I liked a lot of what I saw in there, but there are still questions as to comp analysis and system analysis that I think would be beneficial in weighing in prior to our making our judgments, and something that's going to impact not only the road department, but all the other union workers that are going to look at this and want to see some kind of parity, rightfully so. Thank you.
So, Chair, if I could, there was a process. It started in April, and whether or not, however, we're going to write the history on what went wrong here, there was a proposal made. I haven't seen the emails as to find out why it got retracted, but then it did get retracted, so I'll give you that for whatever reason, Mr. Olson's getting thrown under a pretty fast-moving bus here. But what I want to bring up is that in the June meeting, there's 12 positions that were reclassed. 12 positions. We're asking for 18 positions, or 17 actually, to be reclassed. This isn't something that is just out of the blue. We were able to figure out, staff was able to figure out 12 positions, and it came before the board. It got passed through the union. One of the young ladies spoke today about how unfair it is for us to circumvent the system. She was one of the people that benefited from one of those reclasses. So this isn't just something that we bypassed. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it didn't get through because somebody didn't stand behind their employee. So I feel as if we are in a situation where if all that we can approve today is A, then that's fine. But I think it's fair for us to point out that we can't do a one-size-fits-all in this county anymore. We have to go department by department. If the auditor and controller or admin came to us and says, we've been at a 50% vacancy rate for 2, 3, 4 years, we would try and do something to help them out. But somehow we don't apply that same thing to our roads and our sheriff. Why is that? Why can't we do that? Why can't we just look at the department? Because it's our job to make sure that we're protecting this community. It's our job to make sure that we are keeping this infrastructure going, and so it's viable. So I hear you. If we have to, and the only thing that we can get out of today is A, I'd love for us at least to see something because it's movement in the right direction. It's this board's word that we care about the infrastructure. It's this board's commitment that we are willing to say we've got to do something differently because we cannot let our roads become our jail.
I agree that, and that's the one thing that I think the board was unanimous, that we all recognize that, and that's why it was a priority. But when we rush and we push to make rash decisions and judgments and spend money that obviously is wasted if we're not even waiting for the information to come back to us in order to educate us and to teach us and to hopefully inform us as to what exactly is going to be beneficial when it's compared to all the other salaries and all the other positions that we are going to be looking at in our comp study.
Then we shouldn't have done it for the 12 others. That's, I guess, my point, is we allowed that to happen for 12 other positions on June 25th. We allowed that process to be. We didn't allow it for this. I mean, it's as simple as that. But with that, I'll make a motion that we approve wage adjustments for the roads division classification as recommended by the county administrative officer in attachment A. And we approve the revisions to the attached road division classification description as requested by the director of the community development department and as recommended by the county administrative officer, and that we authorize human resources, to complete all necessary administrative tasks to reflect any action taken by the board as requested by the county administrative officer.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. I just wanted to say, this comp study that we're expecting to get in 4 to 6 months, what's it going to tell us about our road department? It's going to tell us that we're understaffed. It's going to tell us where our compensation lies as it compares to other counties and what competition that we have to deal with the state and the federal competitors. We know that, from what Jeff said a minute ago, that the job that the guys have there is a good job. We saw it from multiple comments in Facebook threads that said, I love my job there. I wish I could go back. I just needed to be paid more, so I had to go to Caltrans. So we have a great understanding that our road department is run well, but it's understaffed. I don't understand how we could come to the idea that we're rushing into something after they've been understaffed for 2, 3, 4 years. We know that pay is the issue, and we need to deal with that in a significant manner. So I don't believe that we're being hasty at all. And we need to be mindful of the investment that we've made in a large amount of equipment and the dollars that represents. Jeff could probably agree with me, I'm sure, that if you put a rookie truck driver into your trucks all the time, they're going to spend more time in the shop than they're going to spend on the road. Same goes for a grader operator. You put a rookie grader operator on, you're going to be buying tires on each side of the thing, and they're $1,000-$1,500 a piece. So having a rookie workforce is really detrimental to the roads, and not that rookies caused this to happen, but we do have 2 signs on South Fork Road representing a couple of deaths that have happened from guys in our road department. And there is an element of skill there that we need to be sure and have in our road department just to keep them safer. We have that responsibility as well. But I do appreciate what Supervisor Starkey says, that we have to protect this infrastructure. And yep, our roads have looked very good in the past, but if we keep ignoring them, they're not going to look worth driving on. We may as well just pull the pavement up and have them on gravel, because they'll go to a point where it's going to be hard to catch back up. So I do appreciate Mr. Olson coming forward with this kind of ambitious reclass. I think it's a necessary step. I regret that we can't come to a decision to implement that today, but I will make a second to Supervisor Starkey's motion.
We have we have a motion and a second. Any other comment?
I'd certainly like to say something.
Yeah.
I've listened to the discussion here today. I do think there was a lot of dangerous precedent that was at least attempted to be set at that June meeting. I think we have a process essentially in place that works well currently for the represented bargaining groups, for the county administration, and for us, and that's why we follow these procedures. We heard during general public comment today, and we also heard during this item that if we do move forward with this item for this one group, it's definitely going to reflect in the discussions going forward for all the groups. And I don't see why it wouldn't. That's the way this has always come down. And that is what I recall, at least every time we have these discussions, our CEO and our budget team reminding us of. But I also understand Supervisor Starkey. It's how do we get to a point where we find a mechanism that allows us to recruit at a higher level of pay for this department. Currently, we don't have a mechanism for doing that within our policies and procedures and how we bargain in good faith. And I'm not sure with the processes that are here in place, we're going to resolve this overnight by taking this step. Not only before we get the facts in place that allow us to take a more aggressive decision-making process on increasing those wages, which I heard very clearly from our CEO at the June 26th meeting, is getting those data points in place so the reclassifications could occur to where we could justify increased wages within these departments. Spelling those pieces out and being patient with our strategic planning process and the approval now of going out and hiring the consultant to do those studies does take time. But again, I'm not entirely sure an increased wage is going to increase the number of bodies that we have at the road department. There's private industries here currently today that have increased wages significantly by 25 to 30% and have yet to see the result of those increased wages with warm bodies. Instead, what we see when at least the public sector has done that in the past is we've seen a stealing from our current community workforce. There's no new bodies coming into our area to fill those positions. We're just, the healthcare, not the Department of Health is losing employees to the school district because the school district, through legislative action, has had increased budget specific to mental health issues. So now all our employees are shifting over there. We're not seeing a new recruitment of bodies. So I guess I'm just questioning whether or not this fix, which is being advocated for to increase wages to make it more attractive for folks to come on board, is actually going to work. And then what does that eventually put us in, which is the job of our CEO and our auditor controller to really tell us how much money we have left to spend. And that's really the bottom line. Do we want to put ourselves in a deficit spending situation? And I think Supervisor Wilson did make a good point. Wages are wages, and it begins to max out the various revenue sources that are coming into that budget to backfill that. But then what do we have left to buy the materials that are going to allow those individuals to do their job if we have nothing left? And I think that's where our strategic planning process has been effective, because we are prioritizing projects, using money out of SB1, potentially using money out of Measure R to either leverage or cumulatively put forward a project that's going to get 1 mile or 2 miles of road completed. But doing it hastily, and I understand the reason for the haste, doing it hastily without the facts and the information in place is not a smart move. And I think that's why, at least in this case, our department head, Director Kunstl, with all her years of experience, negotiated with our budget team in good faith to put forward a proposal that looked at the here and now with the information she had in place. And that we will go into those negotiations starting next month and hopefully find, after Clint sees, not using a crystal ball, but the actual data, if we have room to bump up to that next step using the facts that we gain through that compensation analysis. Those are my thoughts, and really why I enjoyed the discussion today. I think it needs to be had. I wish there were mechanisms to step out, but there currently aren't. I think if we're going to focus time in the future, it's finding a way, working with the unions, to step out to really recognize those individuals within that bargaining.
So if I could just say a few things. We don't know if this is going to fix it. We don't know if it's going to work, but we haven't even tried. 4 years almost that I've been on this board, this has been a discussion. For 4 years, we've been given direction to the director as to the CAO to try and do something to bring forward information that's going to actually fix this. As far as, are we going to have enough money left over? Well, thank goodness that we approved a budget hearing today, Supervisor Howard, so that we're able to really dive deep into these budgets. One thing that is getting tossed around is this negative budget that this is going to impact us. It's truly not in this particular department. And then my final point is, what mechanism in place do we have to be able to not do the one size fits all? That's already in place. We just saw it on June 25th when we approved 12 positions to be reclassified, all but one of them for higher level salaries. So it's already a mechanism in place. We just chose not to use it.
Supervisor Stark, I just, not to bemoan this issue, but we have absolutely 100% tried to directly put into effect for this specific group of employees. In 2021, we made that move to increase salaries. I can't recall what it is. It was 11 or 12%.
It was 5% 2 years in a row.
And then to increase that by 9.5% close to the next year, and then in addition the following year after that. So the 3 years, another 2.5% COLA. Neil, please help me out because my memory's foggy here. I don't believe we haven't done anything to try to compensate our road employees to make these positions more attractive. What did we do?
If you're referring to what was in my board report, in 2021, there were focused range adjustments for the road division, anywhere from 5% to 20% range adjustments. The road worker series were given 12.5%. You're alluding to the contract, which was a 9% contract, which is added to those wages outside of the focused range adjustments, and then an additional 2.5% that was given by the board to address minimum wage changes.
So one thing I do want to point out, and I understand that, but we're talking 10% on $20.55 an hour, right? That's what the amount is after all those things that Mr. Lopez just pointed out. We're not talking, if someone the higher level pay is getting 10%, If they make $86 an hour and we give them 10%, that's another $8.60 an hour. For these guys, it's another $2 an hour. I mean, it's just for the work that they do, the level of technical issues that they have to do, and then the fact that it's our role here to look at succession planning. I think that we need to be the ones doing that. So I'm hearing what you're saying. I understand that efforts have been made in the past, but to really not dive in to look at the actual structure of that department and really critically look at, is $20 enough for somebody to drive the $500,000 piece of equipment that we just approved for them to go buy? It seems really, really low to me. And I understand that there's a mechanism in the place, but why are we limiting ourselves to not really looking department by department as to what their needs are, instead of just get everybody 10% and that should solve the problem? That doesn't solve the problem.
I don't think anybody sitting up here is not advocating for a mechanism to do that, but we currently do not have one in place where that represented group can't come up forward, which is their job, is to advocate exactly for what you're talking about. So we need that mechanism. We currently don't have it. I don't believe so.
Okay, then how do you justify that on June 25th, 12 positions came forward with a mechanism to reclassify certain positions within the department? If there's not a mechanism in place, tell me why that was able to happen.
That was a reclassification.
Yes.
It's different than giving across the board
No,
wages to the entire.
Sure, what we're talking about here is reclassifications.
Yes, we're talking about reclassifications in order to fix and hopefully to get more people on board. I'm not entirely sure that's the best mechanism.
As we one of the issues that I have is we make these decisions, we make these motions. In fact, we've just raised the bottom end positions within the road department in order to try to address the low end wage and try to pick those up. We haven't even, the ink's not even really dry on that to see if that's going to have any effect as to recruitment. Today, we just passed an issue that allows the road department to hire at above a level A in various steps. This is so that hopefully we can recruit people that have experience that aren't coming in, and we can entice them to come. So it behooves us as a county to give time to the mechanisms that we're putting in place to see if they have an effect. Are they actually doing something? Are they actually affecting the hiring and recruitment and retention, or are they not? When you make these decisions at haste and you don't even give time to see if those decisions are actually going to have an effect, then you're just shooting blind and wasting a lot of decisions that potentially, because I know we've done this in other departments, and it's helped them in their recruitment and hiring. And it will do the same thing at the road department, but we have to give it time.
Mr. Chairman, just one more question for CAO. If this item A is approved today, it increases wages for that particular department. Starting next month, negotiations are opened up for everybody. Is there a possibility then during that negotiation period, then the bargaining unit could potentially look for additional 1, 2, or 3 year contracts for another additional percentage of what we have here today?
Yes, that's one of the reasons I laid out in my report as well, is that consideration of these range adjustments, knowing that negotiation starts next month with SEIU, who represents the majority of these employees, and typically it results in a 3-year contract with wage adjustments each year. So outside of contract, with the board approving waiving 4.12 today, it's a legitimate 10% range adjustment, which is significant.
Thank you.
One question, if I could then. When you go into these negotiations, in your experience, do you go department by department, or do you just give flat COLAs across the board?
Range adjustments are typically across the board for all SEIU represented employees. It's up to them if they want to approach it differently. They haven't in the past because they like the unity of their group.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion. Please pull the vote.
Supervisor Howard,
No.
Supervisor Starkey,
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges,
Yes.
Chair Wilson,
No. That brings us to the end. Sorry, folks.
Meeting adjourned.
That brings us to the end of all the items. This meeting is adjourned.